Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry, a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. All right, one of the things that I'm seeing in my YouTube analytics that tells me about who my subs are also subbing to is Dr. Mike. And that intrigued me because I'm like, what do my followers have to do with that? So I went and looked at the playlist and some of the videos, and there's some great historical themed things in there. And one of the videos that just barely came out that I thought was right up my alley was this one, and it's titled A Medical Look into What Killed Every President. Yeah, I want to see that and see, like, I guess a doctor's perspective, because I'm assuming he's a doctor. You can let me know about him and some of the stuff that he's up to. Let me know down in the description, and if this is a channel you'd like to see me cover more. All right, with that, as always, the original video link is down below. Make sure you're supporting Dr. Mike. Give the video a like, view, and subscribe. All right, with that, let's get started.
There have been 45 presidents in the history of the United States, and as of uploading this video, 39 of them have died. Today I'm talking about what
Quick, name the other 6 that are still alive.
Killed every president and the bizarre circumstances that surrounded many of their deaths. 4 assassinations, a top secret surgery aboard a fishing boat. God bless America, and Pee-woo! George Washington.
I love the idea to get this perspective there, because you don't, unless it's an assassination, it's only happened a handful of times. You don't really learn about deaths of presidents. You know what I mean? Because once they come out of power, they get forgotten unless they stay active in a lot of things, which is not what a lot of presidents do. A lot of presidents like to be done and then be done. I don't blame them. All right, let's start with George.
Washington was killed by his doctors. That's what I think anyway. In 1799, then retired President Washington developed a sore throat. His condition worsened over the next few days, despite the efforts of several physicians. Of course, in 1799, medical treatment was very
that's what I was
poor,
gonna say.
as doctors often believed the best way to treat ailments was by balancing the humors, meaning they would balance the amount of blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile within the body.
That makes no sense!
Over the course of
Seems
several
legit.
days, doctors drained Washington of 32 ounces of his blood, gave him blisters in his throat, forced him to vomit, and filled him with enemas. No surprise, Washington passed after several days of this medieval torture. I do wonder if Washington would have lived longer had he just hydrated well and maybe got a Z-Pack.
Or lived after the Industrial Revolution, when life expectancies skyrocketed and better medical technology, better medical research. If he was actually just born 100 years later, you probably would have been fine. But anyway, this kind of stuff would happen all the time. It's like they don't know how to treat stuff, so you do something and you roll a dice, flip a coin if this is going to work or not. So all right, let's see what we got. Adams
lived until 90 years old.
He was old.
The longest living president until Ronald Reagan, when he died of heart failure, likely related to arterial sclerosis, a blockage of your arteries due to plaque buildup, usually occurring with old age or poor lifestyle habits. Strangely enough, Adams died on July 4th, 1826. Exactly 50 years to the day he signed the Declaration of Independence, and just 5 hours after Thomas Jefferson, who died the same exact
Isn't that nuts?
day.
I always thought that's nuts. You see that? That's a common meme you'll see. It's like these founding fathers die on our patriotic day, the same day. Like, how fitting. Like, if you were going to be a founding father, isn't that exactly the day you would want to die? Maybe we should look into that. Is there a conspiracy there?
The cause of his death is not conclusive, but it was likely due to a variety of ailments such as diarrhea, kidney damage, and an enlarged, possibly cancerous prostate. America's shortest president at just 5'4", James Madison, lived until the age of 85 when he died of congestive heart failure, where the heart's ability to pump blood deteriorates, causing fluid buildup throughout the body. While specific details are not well recorded, James Monroe died in 1831 after a battle with tuberculosis.
Such a major killer of especially the pre-industrial or tuberculosis, horrible disease. It's so nice that it has been dealt with, you know, so much better now these days, because it's
a bacterial infection that usually attacks the lungs.
Common
While he may
form
have
of
been
death.
only America's 5th president, at the time of his death, he joined Adams and Jefferson to become the 3rd president to die on July 4th. The fact of former presidents dying on July 4th was not lost on the American people, with the trend becoming a bit of a mid-1800s meme. John Quincy Adams served one term.
Now, wasn't it John Adams too? Is it John Adams that also said that he predicted that our actual day of independence will be celebrated on July 2nd or 3rd? I forget what he had said, something like that, and ends up being the 4th. And I've put this question on some of the YouTube polls I've done, where like, should we change our Independence Day? Should it be when independence was voted on, or when the actual draft comes out, like you know, July 4th, or with the Treaty of Paris that officially ended the revolution and the British formally accepted American independence. I think it's still a debatable question, but I remember the results were heavily leaned towards it should still be the 4th. Let me know in the comments what you think about that.
President and then became the first to die in office, though not in office as president. You see, after losing the election of 1829, John Quincy Adams continued his public service by holding Congress for 9 terms. At the age of 78, during a contentious debate over the Mexican-American War on the floor of the House of Representatives, Adams collapsed, suffering a significant stroke where there's decreased circulation to the brain leading to neurological damage. He died at his home 2 days later, but not before what must have been a spectacular emergency on Capitol Hill. Andrew Jackson.
Think if I'm kind of surprised that more people don't just die in debates. These like older, like unhealthy people get so animated and heated up they just keel over, right? And I don't know. I would like to think in that debate they're debating the Mexican-American War and the ethics of it, and should we do this? It's all this, or should we do a war that seems unprovoked and do all that and just be so animated that you just keel over? Maybe for some politicians, that's their dream death, dying in debate for your passion. I don't know.
Jackson suffered a long and slow decline in health before dying at the age of 78. The cause of his death, though, has been widely disputed, some attributing it to the use of the medication calomel, leading to heavy metal poisoning. But JAMA states he probably died of kidney
heavy metal poisoning. Yeah. Want to go down that way.
With full body swelling known at the time as dropsy. While it's not entirely...
All right. Also, we got to note that Jackson also survived assassination attempts. So one story where the guy comes up, shoots his gun, it misfires or whatever, and then Jackson like beats him within an inch of his life of his cane.
certain what killed Martin Van Buren.
I know. You can't live well. You can't live with those chops. They're like this long. Like, how do you even do that? That's gotta like drain blood from your brain. You had to have had a hemorrhage or a stroke.
Sources, including his obituary in the New York Times, cite issues originating within his chest. It's likely his decline began with a lung infection, leading to cardiopulmonary failure. Now, things get interesting. William Henry Harrison delivered a 2-hour inaugural address in freezing drizzle without a coat or gloves, which many people believe to be the cause of pneumonia, an infection of the lungs, which killed him only 1 month into serving office. In 1841, germs had not been discovered. Germs! Everywhere! Rather, doctors believed the most effective medical treatments were to, just like with Washington, balance the humors. Doctors blistered the president and made him drink substances that forced him to vomit and have diarrhea. Of course, none of those methods actually worked. Goop. And so, William Henry Harrison remains our president with the shortest stint in office. John Tyler took over for William Henry Harrison and served the remainder of that term as president. Historians claim he was never very healthy to begin with and died in 1862 of a stroke. He remains the only president in U.S. history not to be buried with the Stars and Stripes, as he was a darling of the Confederacy and was buried with their flag instead. James K.
Big oof. Big oof. You know that's going to change. They're gonna rewrite that. They're gonna take that down for sure. Tyler also known for like, you know, like he would also known for like having children like when he was really old, and then like his children were really old when they had children. And wasn't it not even recently that like, even though he lived so long ago, he had like an actual like biological like grandchild, I think, that was still living, just with the age spans. Someone correct me on that in the comments. If that was the thing that was coming to my, I thought that was Tyler. All right, James K. Polk, speaking of Mexican-American War.
K. Polk had grand visions of his life after the presidency, leaving Washington on a southern tour of the U.S., eventually hoping to end in Nashville, where he had purchased a large home. Unfortunately, Polk died 3 months after leaving office. The shortest post-presidency stint in American history, from cholera, a diarrheal disease caused by drinking contaminated water.
Another thing that when germ theory is better understood and like cleanliness and that kind of stuff, you had those cholera outbreaks in like industrial London that would wipe out countless people, and they didn't understand the whole like, you need to separate your like your sewage water and your potable water. Like, you can't have that stuff around. But that's the worst though. You don't even get to enjoy your retirement. Like when you would retire from being president, you want to chill for a while and you just up and croak.
Zachary Taylor served a year in office before dying under what many would say are suspicious circumstances. To this day, many claim he was poisoned by pro-slavery Southerners. The cause of his death was so controversial that in 1991, his descendants actually agreed to have his remains exhumed for testing, which did not find a high enough volume of arsenic inside his remains to suggest a definitive poisoning. A more common theory is he contracted cholera or dysentery after celebrating the 4th of July in Washington, D.C., which at the time had primitive sewers, often resulting in food and water contamination. Miller film,
like we were saying earlier there, that contamination, just you're still living in an era, we're still at presidents here that aren't, I mean, we by now, okay, you're getting into like the mid-19th century and stuff's improving, but we're still a few decades away from really having a much smarter view and consciousness of health and what causes, you know, types of problems.
Fillmore is rumored to have been the White House's first health-conscious president, avoiding alcohol and tobacco. He did die from a stroke at the age of 74. Franklin
What good it did him then, huh?
Pierce died at the age of 69 from cirrhosis of the liver,
Very
likely
forgotten
due to a
president.
lifetime of heavy drinking. Alcohol abuse damages the liver directly, as ethanol is a toxin, which leads to inflammation and massive swelling within the gut.
And alcoholic content back then was so high. I mean, you're just drinking straight alcohol, like just straight alcohol with a tiny bit of other liquid in it.
James Buchanan is considered by many to be the worst president in the history of the United States, as he did nothing to preserve the Union before handing a country divided by slavery to Abraham Lincoln.
He basically just putting off the inevitable and then just thrown into the next president. Here, Lincoln, here's the hot potato, right? And we know like how contentious of an election it was in 1860, but yeah, that's why people talk about it, is, you know, but I mean, what would Buchanan have done? I mean, they had been delaying the inevitability of the Civil War forever. What, of course, was bringing the slavery issue, of course, was Western expansion, right? Because up to that point, there's pretty much a fairly even balance of slave states and non-slave states, and presidents just were hoping that they could just keep that balance going, but it just got too much because of this explosion after the Mexican-American War. It's like there was so much more territory now.
Useless.
Information on his death is far and few between, with most reports claiming he died at the age of 77 from pneumonia. Abraham Lincoln, gun. Next. Just kidding. The death of Abraham.
Wait, what? What happened?
Lincoln is probably the most well-known on this list. It's not without its intrigue. Just 5 days after the Union victory of the Civil War, famous actor and Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth snuck into Lincoln's box at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. and fired a 44 caliber single-shot Derringer pistol directly into the back of Lincoln's head from just inches away. Lincoln immediately fell into a coma and died across the street 7 hours later.
It's actually, when you think about it, pretty amazing he didn't die instantly on the spot. Point blank, the pistol.
This we know, but here are the juicy details that are often looked over. Heavily detailed notes on Lincoln's final hours and his following autopsy were taken by the president's personal physician, Dr. Robert Stone, which is how we know that Dr. Stone did nothing to help the situation by using his finger to probe the wound and search for the bullet, putting unnecessary pressure inside the president's brain at his most vulnerable time. Look, he was going to die no matter what they did, but a dirty, gloveless finger inside the brain probably didn't help. Andrew Johnson became the...
Okay, so do I need to note this? If somebody gets shot in the head, don't try to stop the bleeding. I mean, I've had to take a lot of first aid classes, and we haven't talked about that one yet. All right, Andrew Johnson, also considered the worst president ever?
First president to go on and serve in the Senate after his presidency, and died of a stroke at the age of 66. Ulysses S. Grant was an avid cigar smoker, which was a likely cause of his throat cancer that killed him at the age of 63. It was this death that largely sparked Americans' fear of the disease, which we still see today. Rutherford B. Hayes died at the age of 70 of complications after a heart attack. Assassination number 2. Only 18 months into his presidency, James A. Garfield was shot on a train platform in Baltimore, Maryland by Charles Julius Guiteau, a lawyer and author who was deeply disillusioned, believing he was instrumental to Garfield's election and therefore furious when he was not rewarded with his own political appointment. Guiteau was executed after being found guilty of murdering Garfield, but not before he argued that he didn't kill Garfield. Rather, Garfield's doctors were to blame. While Guiteau was no doubt responsible for pulling the trigger, firing a bullet into Garfield's back, the thing is, You might be right.
What?
Reports indicate that the bullet created a 3.5-inch wound in Garfield's abdomen, with the bullet finally resting in a benign location between his groin and navel. It took 3 months for the infection to kill Garfield, but not before countless doctors used their fingers and tools to open the wound to 20 inches in width in an endless search for this bullet. It wasn't just the doctors either, as famed telephone inventor Alexander Graham Bell used the world's first metal detector to provide a general location of this bullet. Countless physicians have debated the exact...
I did not know Bell did that. That's brilliant. You get a metal detector. It's not like a magnet that sucks up the bullet out of their body.
Cause of Garfield's death, and we'll never be able to say for sure. But had doctors simply sewed Garfield up and allowed him to rest, he may not have died from this gunshot wound after all.
Now, some of the medical history I need to learn more about. Was this about the time when I feel like it was still a little bit of ways away from this time when it became common knowledge and stuff that you'd like for surgeons or people that are, doctors that are delivering babies to wash up and try to disinfect before. I know, like, originally I forgot who the guy was that like proposed that in like medical journals that like, no, you need to we should start washing our hands. Like all these babies are dying in childbirth and from early diseases, like we should be doing this. And he was like laughed out and like criticized from the medical community for that. But was this about the time where that became standard practice? Let me know.
Mr. A. Author died 2 years after leaving office from a significant
another crappy
thought to have been caused by his hypertension or high blood pressure. Grover Cleveland died of a heart attack at the age of 71, but that's far from the most interesting event in his medical history. In the summer of 1893, at the beginning of his second term in office, he felt a lump in the roof of his mouth. His doctor diagnosed it as cancer and recommended having it removed immediately. Cleveland feared news of him having cancer would shake the stock market and disrupt the nation, so he opted for a secret surgery aboard a yacht during a 4-day fishing trip.
Because we've seen this historically, where if serious medical conditions like that could be life-threatening, if that does get out, it can rock the whole stock market. It actually happened in the years leading up to the Great Depression too, because there's a lot of instability and apprehension, I guess, if potentially a president could be out of office because, people fear, what are going to be the economic policies of another president. So there's just a lot of speculation there.
It is a secret.
6 surgeons numbed the president up with ether, successfully removed the tumor, 5 teeth, and a large part of his upper left jawbone in just 90 minutes, swaying back and forth in the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. Because the surgery was inside the president's mouth and his signature mustache remained intact, Cleveland hid the surgery from the public. Despite whirling rumors, smear campaigns, and discrediting journalists, the operation remained unconfirmed for 24 years before one of the doctors broke their silence and finally told the truth. Benjamin Harrison was the grandson of President William Henry Harrison, and just like Grandpa, he died of pneumonia at the age of 68. Assassination number 3. 6 months into his second term in 1901, William McKinley was shot twice in the abdomen by Leon Frank.
Yeah, that's the hardest one.
It's Czolgos.
Yeah, good luck with that one, man.
Czolgos.
By Leon Frank Czolgos, making him the 3rd U.S. president to be assassinated in 36 years. Czolgos lost his job during the economic panic of 1893 and became a believer in anarchism, or a terrorist movement sweeping across Europe that seek to assassinate world leaders. Czolgos approached McKinley in a crowded building at a festival in Buffalo, shook his hand, and fired 2 shots from a .32 revolver. One bullet bounced off a button and didn't harm McKinley, but the other penetrated his abdomen. McKinley was rushed to a nearby hospital where a surgeon sewed up the entry and exit wounds from the bullet in the president's stomach, though the bullet was never found. Doctors were optimistic for a healthy recovery in the following days, but a week or so later, they discovered his wounds had become gangrenous, where parts of the body begin to die and cause deeper infection. It was the death of William McKinley that ignited a national discussion about protecting the president, with Congress ultimately charging the Secret Service with that exact duty in 1906. Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, because you've had 3 assassinations, and you see it's kind of interesting when like you compare them. You have like Wilkes Booth, and then I don't even want to try to do the name again. Where you have these guys that are conducting these assassinations because of like political ideologies, and then you're gonna have a similar one, at least we think, with JFK, right? And these people that have like, yeah, you have like pro-Confederate and the politics of the Confederacy with Lincoln, and then with McKinley, an anarchist, you know, someone that's just anti-government, believing, because McKinley was criticized by a lot as being this like guy that was, you know, so pro-business but not like pro-working class guy, and so, you know, got a lot of heat from that from working class folks. And then whatever messed up ideology that kept going back and forth in the head of Lee Harvey Oswald as he bounced around between communist sympathies and then like being the opposite of that and going back and forth, these politically motivated ones. Then you just have one though, like where it's just like straight up jealousy of not getting a position. So it's like all these different reasons of why assassination happened. But it's something to think about now is the president now today, you know, today is so well protected that do you think we're going to see another one? You think we will, like, we could see another one? And then what would it take to do that? Would it require, because like in a lot of these assassinations, you have these lone wolf guys, for the most part, right, that are able to gain fairly easy up close access to a president. And you don't get that much, but there's still like some of that. And obviously, as they're saying here, after McKinley, we start seeing the Secret Service being formed and something more official. So I wonder what that could look like in the future as far as the likelihood of something like that happening, unfortunately.
Roosevelt died in his sleep in 1919 when a blood clot entered his lung. Future Vice President Thomas R. Marshall famously said, "Death had to take Roosevelt sleeping, for if he had been awake, there would have been a fight."
Yeah.
William Howard.
Now, also, and sadly too, in the story with Teddy Roosevelt is his wasn't it his wife and his mother that died on the same day? Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. How depressing.
Taft was our nation's heaviest president, at one point reaching 340 pounds, and died at the age of 72 after lingering in a coma caused by complications with high blood pressure, heart disease, and inflammation of the bladder. Time for my favorite one. While in office, Woodrow Wilson suffered a stroke in 1919 that paralyzed his left side and nearly blinded him. Out of fear that the news would shake the country, Wilson and his inner circle kept the president's health a complete secret, hiding him away where he could only be seen by his personal physician and his wife, Edith Wilson, the star of this story. While it's never been conclusively proven, it is believed that instead of serving as the intermediary between her husband, the president, and the cabinet actually running the country, Edith took it upon herself to make countless executive decisions, effectively serving as America's first female president. Where's that movie? Woodrow Wilson survived the remainder of his term and died 3 years later of further complications from his stroke. Warren G.
Now, before it moves on there, it's important to know context too of what he was doing as president in those years, which was he was trying to rally the country and rally people to support the League of Nations, which he had proposed at the end of World War I, which Congress eventually is going to deny. United States, proposed it but never actually joined it. There's a whole. You can learn about that a lot more. But anyways, he was campaigning around the country to try to get support for the U.S. joining it, and really hurt his health too, and may have been contributed to the conditions by which he would get a stroke and hurt his kill him.
Harding died in office at the age of 57 from what is believed to have been a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. His cause of death is not entirely conclusive because his wife refused an autopsy. Calvin Coolidge died alone in his bedroom from coronary thrombosis, or a clot in the coronary artery blocking blood flow to the heart. Herbert Hoover lived 31 years after leaving the White House amidst the Great Depression. In 1962, Hoover was diagnosed with colon cancer and had a tumor removed from his large intestine. 2 years later, his intestines ruptured, causing massive bleeding, leading to a coma and his eventual death in 1964. Franklin Delano Roosevelt holds the record for most presidential terms, having won 4 elections in a row from 1932 until his
didn't finish the 4th because he died.
Death in office. In 1944, a team of physicians performed a full assessment of FDR and found he was suffering from numerous heart issues, high blood pressure, and bronchitis, likely all of these caused by a lifetime of smoking and heavy amounts of tobacco. Despite his declining health, he ran for a 4th presidential term, privately saying he would resign once World War II was over. The stress eventually overwhelmed Roosevelt in April of 1945, resulting in a brain bleed while posing for a portrait. He collapsed and died shortly thereafter. Harry Truman.
Yeah, polio when he was earlier too, that ended up deteriorating his leg strength, where he had to walk with like braces on his leg and then kind of with like a cane or something. And then by the end, he was completely wheelchair bound, even as president, and tried to hide that from the public too. You don't want to be, you know, seen that way. So there's not a lot of actually photos out there of him in his wheelchair, and that was intentional. If he had to do a photo op, he wanted to be like propped up or something like that. Or if he was sitting, it wasn't like a wheelchair, it was at his desk or something like that.
Was hospitalized for 22 days at the age of 88 because of heart failure, heart arrhythmia, and kidney failure. He became comatose due to sepsis, the body's life-threatening response to an infection, and died the night after Christmas in 1972. At one point, Dwight D. Eisenhower smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day, which contributed to years of heart issues. He suffered several heart attacks and even survived numerous cardiac arrests. No surprise he died of heart failure in 1969. He did beat Hitler, though. John F. Kennedy may have had the most complex medical history out of any U.S. president. He is known to have had or was speculated to have the following conditions and diseases: scarlet fever, measles, whooping cough, chickenpox, severe spastic colitis or IBS, Cushing's syndrome, urinary tract infections, prostatitis, Addison's disease, malaria, adrenal insufficiency, and chronic back pain, amongst others. Despite his countless health problems
and deferred his, you know, like military duties. But when you have that many like medical problems, isn't there usually something behind all that? There's like a reason why you're so sick and have so many different things, right? I don't know if it's just a poor immune system or something, or a disease that leads to other diseases. I didn't know about that many. I just knew about his back pain.
His back issues were the one that played a role in his infamous assassination in Dallas in 1968. Specifically, the back brace that he wore because of failed back surgeries hidden underneath his suit, it actually prevented Kennedy from ducking after being hit with the first bullet. Who fired the bullet? Well, that's a video for a different channel. Lyndon B. Johnson.
Wait. How would he be ducking? How would he know? Wait, let me go back.
Because of failed back surgeries hidden underneath his suit, it actually prevented Kennedy from ducking after being hit with the first bullet. Who fired the bullet? Well, that's a video for a different channel. Lyndon B. Johnson.
Okay, so he would have been shot, and then he would have been able to avoid the next one like that. I mean, maybe it was, if we go by just, you know, kind of what the basic, you know, widely held story with Oswald. I mean, it was an incredible shot of what he was able to do, but I haven't heard that one actually gain any kind of like notoriety about the back thing that actually could end up saving him.
Was a hero of the Democratic Party for passing groundbreaking civil rights legislation in the 1960s. And he was also the hero of the Party for going hard with food, alcohol, and cigarettes. In a famous interview with Walter Cronkite, LBJ said smoking calmed him down, and it was better for his heart to smoke and be relaxed than not smoke and be nervous. An interesting hypothesis that probably contributed to the heart attack that killed him in his Texas ranch in 1973. Richard Nixon was 81 years old when a blood clot in his left atrium became dislodged and traveled to his brain, causing a stroke. He quickly fell into a coma and died 4 days later. Gerald Ford died in 2006 with a death certificate that cites arteriosclerotic cerebrovascular disease and diffuse arterial sclerosis, or thickening of arterial walls causing poor circulation, leading to organ damage. Ronald Reagan spent the...
I mean, he was a big dude. Ford was a big guy. He was a college football player. Big, strong dude. Reagan gets assassination attempt.
Final 10 or so years of his life in a losing battle with Alzheimer's disease, where brain cells and connections die slowly, causing loss of memory and other issues. He eventually died in 2004 from pneumonia. And finally, Alzheimer's, our most recent, George H.W. Bush, who in 2012 was diagnosed with vascular Parkinsonism, or a type of deterioration of brain tissue from blocked small blood vessels affecting motor function, necessitating the use of a mobility scooter and limiting his speech. The condition slowly worsened into his 90s, and he died on November 30th, 2018.
Is he the... I mean, I didn't hear all the years. So was George H.W. Bush the president that died at the oldest age? Is anybody else? I didn't catch that. Anyone else could live another 90s?
I actually immigrated to the U.S. at the age of 6. Here's that entire story in Draw My Life animated format.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
to enjoy, and as always, stay happy and healthy.
Awesome. We give you my final thoughts. Well, that was fascinating. I'm liking Dr. Mike. He's very good on the camera. He speaks well, charismatic, and that was interesting. The editing was great. The production quality was great. That was great. I am definitely interested in seeing, you know, more things, especially if it has to do with history or education. But yeah, there was some great stories there as far as stuff that I hadn't heard of. And you heard me throughout the thing. I won't repeat them all, but yeah, some of those interesting deaths, because I've only really ever focused on like the assassinations, but not some of the other deaths after, and especially those ones like pre-industrial ones where they're dying from like bad medicine and just, you know, ignorant medical practices. Those were super fascinating too, right there. Anyway, this was a lot of fun to watch. Thanks to people that have been recommending this channel as well. If there are more Dr. Mike videos you think would fit kind of my channel, let me know. You can put them in the comment, come over to the Discord server, put it in the video suggestions as well, and just let me know. All right, with that, again, the video link is down below. Make sure if you haven't yet to support the original video if you haven't done that. And with that, we'll see you next time.